Well, welcome back, everyone. So the beginning of the video, well, actually, no, I think I will start with this, with welcome back, everyone. So recently, I was watching a Jeff Holliday video, and a subject matter came up dealing with capitalism and climate change. And something occurred to me, an interesting thought occurred to me, is that, okay, so let's put climate change, global warming aside. Let's talk about the ecosystem. It's a well-known fact that when a species of animal overpopulates, it has a significant impact on the ecosystem. In fact, a lot of states, when certain species of animal become overpopulated, they have some kind of initiative to make hunting season open early so that they can hunt these animals and put their population back in check deliberately. It's my understanding this is not a controversial or political statement. This is just environmental science, biological science. It's just fact. It's pretty well accepted in the scientific community that this is scientific fact. Why is it that when we apply it to human beings, we suddenly, because we are magical celestial angel babies and not animals or human people monkeys, suddenly the fact that we are at 7 billion people, it is not an overpopulation of any given species, and we are not subjected to the same rules and of laws of nature and physics as every other species of animal. I find this interesting and fascinating. Well, here's a clip of Jeff Holliday right now.
And then a COD secretary. So stupidity is so confident. And this is from a TikTok that somebody posted. All right, so let's watch this.
I'm about to blow your fucking mind. So capitalism is an economic system based on infinite growth and infinite consumption on a planet with finite resources. Therefore, by definition, it will result in the death of the planet. We can choose to have capitalism or we can choose to have a future, but we can't have both. I'm about to blow.
So the initial knee-jerk reaction to this is, well, I wouldn't say it's stupidity. I would say that's kind of dumbing things down quite a bit. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense until you start to actually analyze it in some sort of futurist sort of way, which
All right. So that was a clip from the video, but I'm gonna be working on my vape mod while I do this. So, you know, maybe this is up for discussion, but it's pretty well documented. So we're gonna have a look here at this. So here we have overpopulation of animals disrupts the ecosystem. Without the balance achieved from the predator-prey relationship, overpopulated herbivores will compete for the same plant species, causing scarcity or wiping out the plant species entirely. The unnatural balance damages the ecosystem and the food chain. Okay. Well, one thought that came to my mind was the example of beavers. Now, beavers have a very interesting aspect to them because they create dams. This can significantly, without even overpopulation, affect an entire ecosystem and deplete certain plant life and animal life of water resources if they dam the water source up too much. There's actually been examples of this that I can think of off the top of my head dating back from the 1800s, where they've had to go and wipe out beaver dams or hunt beavers because they've become overpopulated, because they have actually started damaging the localized ecosystem. And so I wanted to show some of that. Damn it. I don't want to do that. So we have this effects of growing beaver population on habitat and methane gas emissions. There are consequences of the successful efforts worldwide to save beavers from extinction, along with the strong increase in their population over the past 100 years. These furry aquatic rodents have built many more ponds, establishing vital aquatic habitat. In doing so, however, they have created conditions for climate-changing methane gas to be generated in this shallow standing water, and the gas is subsequently released into the atmosphere. In fact, 200 times more of this greenhouse gas is released from beaver ponds today than was the case around the year 1900. Estimates J. Whitefield of the University of Saskatchewan, I don't know what the fuck that is in Canada. He led a study in Springer's journal, whatever that is, Ambio, about the effect that the growth in beaver numbers in Eurasia and the Americas could be having on methane emissions. The fur trade of the 16th and 19th centuries nearly led to the extinction of beaver populations worldwide after trapping was limited to conservation or conservation efforts led to the reintroduction to these animals into their natural ranges. The number of North American castor, okay, so that's the, actual genus species. The Eurasian beavers grew. The North American beavers has also been introduced to Eurasia and South America. Specifically, I don't know how to say these weird words from different parts of the globe. Establishment of these populations has in effect created an anthropogenic greenhouse gas source in these landscapes. Beavers are skilled in building dams and rivers to create standing open water ponds and neighboring wetlands. Such ponds are generally shallow, with the dams seldom being more than 1.5 meters high. Carbon builds up in the oxygen-poor pond bottoms, and methane is generated. This climate-warming gas cannot adequately dissolve in the shallow water and is released into the atmosphere. According to Whitfield, it has long been known that the release of methane from beaver ponds to the atmosphere is more intense than for other types of wetlands. To quantify methane release, his team estimated the size of the current global beaver population, so they also determined the area covered by the beaver ponds. Whitfield's team found that global beaver numbers have grown dramatically to a population of over 10 million. The Eurasian population could grow by an additional 4 million. In the process of population recovery, beavers have dammed up in excess of 42,000 square kilometers of aquatic pond areas, which are bordered with over 200,000 kilometers of shoreline habitat. Parallel to the increase of beaver populations is also a notable increase in methane emissions because of their pond building efforts. At the end of the 20th century, beaver activities contributed up to 0.8 teragrams, or 800 million kilograms, of methane to the atmosphere each year. This is about 15% of what wild cud-chewing animals such as deer, antelope, contributed. Quote, the dynamic nature of beaver-mediated methane emissions in recent years may portend the potential for future changes in this component of the global methane budget. Continued range expansion coupled with changes in population and pond densities. It may dramatically increase the amount of water impounded by beaver, says Whitfield. This, in combination with anticipated increases in surface water temperatures and likely effects on rates of methanogenesis, suggests that the combination of beaver activity to global methane emissions may continue to grow. Okay, I really wish I could have shown this, but here we go. So until 9 years ago, when he began shooting beavers with a .22 caliber rifle, Miguel, stop it. I'm not gonna pay for a fucking subscription. Patrolling the wilderness, okay, so this was supposed to be an article to demonstrate that they do actually encourage diminishing the ever-growing population of beavers, because the beaver dams do create massive ecological issues to not only plant life but other species of animal. So they are actually encouraging people to do something about it. See, it's causing drought and problems, but because National Geographic wants to be a bitch, and because net neutrality is a thing now, of course, we can't just read the fucking article without paying for a subscription. Fuck you. So this was specific to Kansas, and I found interesting because they don't just include beavers, but they include muskrats as well. And the reason why they include beavers is because beavers are indigenous to Kansas, and there are rivers that run through Kansas that beavers use to create, they create their dams out of. And due to this, hold on just a minute. We're gonna go back to this because I forgot to do something important. I'm gonna start this right here. Here we go. Okay, so the audio might be fucked up for part of it and not the rest, but you'll just have to deal with it. All right, so where was I? So there is a significant beaver population in Kansas, and it is well known that they do cause significant amounts of damage to the ecosystem by simply building dams. And this is Wildlife Parks and Tourism Kansas. This is should be a .gov or a .org, but they talk about population control, preventative damage. So what does it say? Muskrats damage ponds by burrowing into dams and banks to make dens, thus increasing the chance of seeping and erosion. Den openings are 4 to 6 inches in diameter and are usually near surfaces through in ponds and frequent water level fluctuations. They may be in deeper water, and clear water dens are usually visible, but okay. And then, we talk about beavers and what they do. Preventative beaver burrows are big enough to damage even well-built dams. Riprat will discourage initial burrowing, but all beaver must be trapped if burrows are to be sealed. If burrows break through the surface of the dam, the opening should be collapsed as far back as possible and filled with clay. They are talking to you about how to stop beavers from making dams, because, as I've said recurring, that because of the overpopulation of beavers and them making dams, they have a significant impact on the localized ecosystem. And apparently it's not so localized because of what they do. It creates methane gas emissions, which is a greenhouse gas. So right now we're just exploring the simple point of, hey, well-known fact has just been accepted as long as I've been alive. Only until recent years would anyone, I think, debate this, that an overpopulation of a species creates problems within an ecosystem. And here you have the state of Kansas outright saying it. They're encouraging you to hunt fucking beavers and destroy their dams. Not to destroy them, but there's a limit on this. You don't want to completely destroy them. You don't want to do it to the point of extinction. But there's a significance that you have to do this to maintain your localized ecosystem, that it's important, and if you don't do it, it could damage crops, it could damage wildlife, it could wreak a lot of havoc. Sorry, I'm trying to get rid of this red spot. All right. So another article I found about I could have sworn that I found another one on beavers, but that's okay. So, all right. The other, so this is beavers, okay? They create dams. What about other species? Another one that I looked up was rats, and that's where you get this one from. Is John B. Collum loved rats. He designed elaborated colonies for the creatures that became a kind of paradise, free of predators and disease, with an unlimited supply of food. But paradise soon became a crowded hell, and that's why his work half a century ago has had such a profound impact on our understanding of humans. And this is where they talk about how overpopulation of rats creates what they call a behavioral sink, and that they become self-destructive. His findings led to the concept of the behavioral sink and suggested that evolution had given animals, perhaps including humans, an innate and irreversible self-destruct button to prevent a species from overpopulating its habitat. He created a doomsday model of what might happen if human beings failed to slow their population growth. There's a picture of it. Very interesting. So we're not talking about just beavers, and actually this includes many species, actually, that, we could go into deer, eagles, we could go into cats, overpopulation of cats, feral cats, and what they do to an ecosystem. And they just start. I do believe they noticed in overpopulation of rodent species, they started to become violent and volatile towards each other, including up to cannibalistic nature. So I will have the links to these in the description below. Here's all the science behind it, even like, so this is pretty sound. I mean, we even have a video clip. Let's see what this is. It's only 8 minutes.
The work of Dr. John Calhoun at the National Institute of Health in Washington, D.C. has attempted to answer this question. In a unique experiment that took years to complete, Dr. Calhoun used white mice to study population growth and its effects on individual behavior. In addition to his renowned research papers, he has recorded some of these observations on film. In this 16-cell mouse habitat, utopian conditions of nutrition, comfort, and housing were provided for a potential population of over 3,000 mice. Yet, in spite of ideal conditions, the mouse population met with catastrophe. Individuals were kept track of by color markings on their fur. Factors which normally control population growth, such as predation by owls or cats, were eliminated. Transmissible disease was also reduced. In effect, the mouse universe simulated the present situation of a continually expanding population of humans. To see how Dr. Calhoun's mouse universe grew, we'll use the familiar population graph again. Within the first 100 days, the mice went through the period Dr. Calhoun called strive. This was a period of adjustment. Territories were established, and nests were made. The next period lasted about 250 days. The population of the mice doubled every 60 days. This was called the exploit period. The use of resources became unequal. Although each living unit was identical in structure and opportunities, more food and water was consumed in some areas. As the population increased, most mice associated eating and drinking with the presence of others, and crowding developed in certain units. The third period, consisting of 300 days, found the population of mice leveling off. This was called the equilibrium period. Dr. Calhoun noticed that the newer generations of young were inhibited, since most space was already socially defined. At this time, some unusual behavior became noticeable. Violence became prevalent. Excess males strived for acceptance, were rejected, and withdrew. Huddling together, they would exhibit brief flurries of violence among themselves. The effects of violence became increasingly visible. Certain individuals became targets of repeated attack. These individuals would have badly chewed and scarred tails. Other young mice growing into adulthood exhibited an even different type of behavior. Dr. Calhoun called these individuals the beautiful ones. Their time was devoted solely to grooming, eating, and sleeping. They never involved themselves with others, engaged in sex, nor would they fight. All appeared as a beautiful exhibit of the species, with keen, alert eyes and a healthy, well-kept body. These mice, however, could not cope with unusual stimuli. Though they looked inquisitive, they were, in fact, very stupid. Dr. Calhoun called the last period the die phase, leading the population into extinction. Although the mouse utopia could house 3,000, the population began to decline at 2,200. In the shift from the equilibrium to the die phase, each animal became less aware of associates, despite all animals being pushed closer together. Dr. Calhoun concluded that the mice could not effectively deal with the repeated contact of so many individuals. The evidence of violence increased to the point where most individuals had had their tails bitten to some degree. Eventually, the entire mouse population perished. Dr. Calhoun's experiment is a classic example of a typical population and its growth when left unchecked. Research in this area continues under his supervision. Currently, Dr. James Hill has taken the basics of the Calhoun experiment to study social behavior even more closely. In his experiments, rats are used instead of mice. Healthy individuals are selected to start the population. The rats are anesthetized so that Dr. Hill can perform a minor operation necessary to the success of his experiments. A small electromagnetic encapsulated device is implanted into every rat. This small unit enables sensing devices to keep track of the movement and position of each individual in the population. After surgery, the rats are introduced to their new, multi-leveled home, all at the same time. The rats immediately begin to explore their new environment, prior to organizing territories and nesting. Dr. Hill will trace how individuals move about in crowded situations. This movement is followed by tubular sensing devices. Every time a rat enters or passes through a tube, the unit detects and registers its presence. This constant movement is monitored by computer. Nesting activity is also studied. Dr. Hill has observed that the larger the population, the less care a mother gives to her nest and young. The same type of individuals that resulted in the mouse utopia are also emerging in the rat population. There are aggressives, asocials, and outcasts. Though these studies use animals, the findings about population growth and individual behavior are being closely compared to our own human population. Like all populations that have existed on this planet, many researchers believe that the human race has reached a crucial...
Okay, I've had enough. But if anybody wanted an example of why communism doesn't work, there you go. And I know part of the video was critiquing capitalism, so that doesn't necessarily mean that communism is the answer. Right now, we're just looking at how overpopulation of a species can disrupt an ecosystem. And here's a Wikipedia article about this experiment. And then this other 11 species that are destroying the planet thing. Kangaroos. Says they are taking over the streets of Canberra. It's so bad that the government officials are now advocating killing much of the population to protect the endangered plants and reptiles kangaroos like to eat. Kangaroos have also broken into homes and become traffic hazards in recent years. China dogs. China's growing middle class has a love affair with dogs, but as the dog population grows, so does an outbreak of rabies. See how this affects ecosystems. You have an outbreak of rabies because too many fucking dogs. Then you have the United States white-tailed deer. Deer do more harm than global warming, according to a study by the Nature Conservancy. The overpopulation of deer is creating massive environmental problems in the eastern United States, eating much of the plants. White-tailed deer are drastically changing the makeup of forests, again, damaging the ecosystem. Worldwide jellyfish. The jellyfish population is growing so fast they might destroy the world. For one, they have a knack for disrupting power plants. That's interesting. Jellyfish have almost no predators, eat everything, and are really hard to kill. Basically, jellyfish could one day rule the seas. England badgers, Canada's cats, South African elephants, India monkeys, Bahamas lionfish. That's ridiculous. I'm not gonna. Okay, so, this is species that are threatened by overpopulation of humans. This is .org. So the Florida panther, the Atlantic bluefin tuna, loggerhead sea turtles, sand plane, blah, blah, blah. So, okay. Mississippi gopher frog. All right. Animal overpopulation occurs when an ecosystem is unstable to support the existing wildlife. Because there are too many of a given species, the environment suffers due to a strain from the natural activities of the overpopulated species. The result can be devastating as animals scrap for food and wander into unnatural habitats in search of something to eat. Disease is also a factor as the ecosystem makes a final attempt to regain a natural balance and order. Overpopulated animal species lead difficult lives with limited resources, lack of food, wandering, damaged ecosystems, disease. Okay, so are we getting the idea here? And then this one, loss of predators affecting ecosystems' health. Okay, so if you have a lack of predators, the herbivores are their population isn't kept in check, and their numbers grow out of control, and they lack any natural predators to keep their population under control, especially in comparison to their mating and breeding habits. All right, so I think it's pretty well understood that overpopulation of a species of animal creates problems for the ecosystem, and that very well easily translates into climate change, as we saw with the beavers and their methane emissions. And human beings deliberately overpopulate cows and chickens and pigs for our own consumption. So why is it that we can accept the fact that when an animal species overpopulates, it creates a devastating impact on an ecosystem, but we can't accept the fact that the human species can do this? And the thing about the human species is we build dams just like beavers do, but we build dams of immense proportions, made out of concrete and structural material that is extremely difficult to erode and destruct. And you think this is not going to have any impact on the ecosystem at all? Are you a lunatic? And as we progress and advance our civilization, at least here in the States and in the United States, we're expanding outward into our wilderness instead of upward like they have done in many major cities. Some of them, the suburbs on the outskirts of the city, instead of expanding up like they probably should, are expanding outward and eliminating more of the wild. It's becoming less wild, and we're seeing an issue in certain states of, let's say, very dangerous animals, venomous snakes, birds of prey, things like big cats that are indigenous to the Americas that normally stay away from people are now interacting with people on a near constant basis because they're running out of habitat to actually live in. And so this is mind-blowing. We've reached 7 billion people in population across the globe. And you have people out there going, oh, global warming, climate change, it isn't real. Resources are not finite. Okay, why is it that you make that a proclamation? But we have significant evidence to show that resources become scarce when any other species of animal becomes overpopulated. And then they also engage in social issues. This has been observed, recorded, replicated, and predicted. This is not something that is debatable. This, literally, it's been observed, it's been recorded, it's been replicated, and then it's been predicted with accuracy. So we as human beings, we like to think of ourselves, we're not animals, we're different. Even though we poop, pee, fuck, consume resources, just like any other animal. We actually do so more than any other animal. Look around me in the background. You see, all this stuff took resources to make. We create giant infrastructures in cities. Now, I'm not saying not to do that. I enjoy my stuff. I enjoy the technological age. I enjoy having the computer. I enjoy making YouTube content. I enjoy video games. I enjoy my cell phone. I enjoy technology. I genuinely do. I actually like living in a city. I would rather live in the city than live out in the wilderness, the woods, the country. I'd rather be surrounded by people. It sort of reminds me that I'm not alone and that there's life happening around me. I sort of like that, being around other living human beings. So we have to get over this hurdle of thinking that we're these magical celestial angel babies that have nothing to do with the animal kingdom, and thus if we overpopulate, there's no problem. It's all, hey, okay, it's not going to have any sustainable impact on the ecosystem. How do you rationalize that? How do you come to that conclusion when we damn well know and have documented evidence that when any other animal species is overpopulated, it significantly has a negative impact on its localized ecosystem, sometimes even globally, as we saw with the jellyfish. So, the overpopulation of some of these species would seem that they're even creating problems for plant life and being destructive in the ecosystem as far as certain indigenous plant wildlife. All right, so as we move into the future, and Jeff Holliday in his video talks about this, is it saying that, I'm not trying to say capitalism sucks. I'm not, right now everything is working. But at some point we are going to have to consider the reality. And this is the thing about, when you're getting into meta-ethics and nihilism and stuff like that. Friedrich Nietzsche said, people often avoid uncomfortable truths, and boy, isn't that the truth. We don't like icky truths. We like confirmation bias. We like to tell ourselves lies to make ourselves feel better. Just because death is uncomfortable, telling yourself there's an afterlife, well, that makes us feel good, but that doesn't actually mean it's true. So this is what I mean is like what we do as a form of escapism is we create alternative realities to make ourselves feel better. Or, like it's like drinking alcohol, as Friedrich Nietzsche compared it to, is that instead of dealing with the reality, drinking alcohol is a way of escaping reality. It's like, well, nothing's working, so I'm going to get drunk and pretend that everything's fine even though it isn't. That's not facing reality. The reality is dark. And the reality is that the planet cannot sustain a human population that is ever growing. Like if the human population grows, let's say, to 15 billion people, how the fuck is the world and its resources going to manage that population level? Now, we could engage in really barbaric overkill of population control by doing like the Chinese did and saying you're only allowed one child per household. That's very authoritarian and I don't like it. There are some other options on the table. Being pro-LGBT is one. Although LGBT people can still reproduce, and some of them want to. They want their own kids. I know that's a nightmare for some of the more conservative people out there, but if you think about it, homosexuality is a non-invasive, non-violent maneuver towards population control. As two males and two females having sex with each other are not going to reproduce. And if they're like me and they don't want kids, hey. And there's also plenty of heterosexuals out there saying, I don't want kids. I don't know that that's necessarily unhealthy at this point. But you've got all these conservative people out there, people like Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, blah, 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 that are really, really concerned with reproduction. Have we not been paying attention, class? The overpopulation of any given species disrupts an ecosystem. And when you're talking about a species like the human species, you're talking about disrupting the ecosystem of the entire planet. This is not complicated science. This is common sense at this point. I don't know if you could take how old that video was from looking at it, but that was made a long time ago. This is not some weird globalist conspiracy theory. This is a reality we have to face, and I think the globalist conspiracy theory is you telling yourself lies so that you can feel better about yourself. You don't want to face the icky reality, so you create an alternative reality so that you can keep on doing what you're doing and not have to feel bad. And the real reality is that while capitalism works today, and I have nothing against capitalism, I have nothing against private ownership and private property and the exchange of monetary value for goods and services. I have no problem with that. But as we approach an ever increasingly less manual and physical labor job force, at some point, it's going to become almost impossible to find a job, especially with a growing population, not a declining one. So maybe the coronavirus is exactly what we needed. I hate to say. But like I said, there's alternatives to population control, like, I don't know, making responsible decisions, not reproducing unless, you've got the financial ability to give the child sustainable resources. Take care of them. But again, with the capitalism thing, like I was saying, and I'm pretty sure Jeff Holliday is at the same conclusion, is that we have to face the reality that someday capitalism may no longer be able to be a sustainable economic system. It's not a political system, it's an economic one. And that very well may be the case. And what are we going to do about it? And as Jeff Holliday pointed out in his video, it's not something that we have to worry about right now, but it's something that we should start talking about and thinking about as an inevitability. And no amount of conspiracy theories that you conjure up is going to change that fact. So it would be wise to start talking about it now. What are we going to do when the job market is saturated with mechanical ingenuity and or AI? How do we create an economic system to monitor the exchange of goods, services, and resources? What are we going to do about that? When us as human beings can no longer financially make money. You might want to consider that. And the allocation of resources as the population grows. Should it grow? Should it shrink? And if we're talking about overpopulation, here's another example of a non-invasive population control. Very sensitive one, very touchy. People get weird about it. Euthanasia. A lot of people jump to a conclusion of a depressed teenager wanting to commit suicide, and we're going to stick them in this weird Norwegian fucking machine and go, okay, there you go, suicide machine. When I say euthanasia, I'm not talking about a depressed teenager that doesn't know what the fuck to do with their life. I'm not even talking about somebody like me who goes through spouts of depression and is just like, what's the point? It's like, no, that's not an excuse. I'm talking about people who are dying, who have, a couple years to live, 6 months. And they're looking at, being bedridden, having their ass wiped for them, can't speak anymore. Maybe the idea of euthanasia should be an option available on the table for those people. And that's a really touchy conversation, but maybe it's a conversation we need to start having. Where do we draw the line on what's ethical as far as euthanasia goes and what's unethical? It's a fair conversation to have. It's a legitimate point. Abortion. I know all the pro-lifers out there, and so I love Ben Shapiro's stupid argument, and it is a stupid argument. When would you say life begins? And most people don't know. They say, I don't know, whatever the doctor says. And he says, well, how about when the heart begins? So he creates the goalpost for them. Can we agree on that? Is heartbeat, Alec, is that correlated to life? Is that something we could call life at that point? And they go, oh yeah, sure. Unknowingly walking into his trap. What's the problem? Well, we don't do abortions after the first trimester because at the end of the first trimester and the beginning of the second trimester is the development of the central nervous system. And this is where we draw the ethical conclusion that it's no longer ethical to perform the abortion is because it has a central nervous system and therefore can interpret pain. Just because it has a central nervous system does not mean that it is conscious, or cognizant. Many things out there have a central nervous system, but are not cognizant or conscious. That's what I think is fun. There's this conservative rapper out there that says there's life on Mars, but you don't want to abort it, or you want to abort a fetus. But that's not considered a life, but microscopic organisms are. Ha ha ha, get it? Well, a single-celled organism is considered life, not in the same sense as complex multi-cellular organisms such as ourselves. There's a big difference between those two things. Come on. I cannot sit here and tell you that bacteria has a sense of cognizance, nor can I say that it has a central nervous system. It is life, though. It is life. I think they're single-celled organisms. There's organisms that have a bit more cellular growth to them than single cell, but they still don't have a central nervous system. But we still consider them life. I wouldn't necessarily say that I would say that a first trimester fetus isn't life, but I would not consider it unethical to abort it, just the same as I wouldn't consider it unethical to take an antibiotic and kill bacteria. I don't consider that unethical. It has no central nervous system, it has no point of awareness that we can perceivably tell, and therefore we draw the conclusion it's not unethical. It has a central nervous system, though. It can interpret pain. And that's where you say that's unethical. And that happens at the end of the first trimester and the beginning of the second trimester. Then people bring up the idea that you can abort a third trimester child. At that point, it's not a fetus. Listen, this is for very specific circumstances where the birth will lead to the death of the mother, or you're talking about like brain dead babies or Harley Quinn babies or something like that only live for 45 fucking minutes outside of the womb, where it's less psychologically traumatic for the parents to just go ahead and perform a third trimester or second trimester abortion rather than basically give birth to something dead. Or give birth to something dead and kill the mother on the way. What's the point? Now, they can remove the disruption of the pregnancy. They can abort the pregnancy. And they have the option to try again and succeed. That is an emergency. It's not, oh, my child has Down syndrome, I want to abort it. They're not going to do it. That is a cop-out argument, and they're misrepresenting the facts on that one, and it's stupid. But these are conversations we should be having. Population control of the human population, how do we do it without being authoritarian about it? I list off abortion, homosexuality, euthanasia, and making a practical choice not to have a child. Like I said, you've got all these conservatives and all these religious people out there that say it's your duty to reproduce. Or I've met in my lifetime religious people where they think it's acceptable today, in today's day and time, to have 10 fucking kids. 10 of them. I'm like, I don't know what you're thinking. Like, I don't know why you want 10 kids. Shit, 10 kids. The survival rate today is immense compared to back in the day. Back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, the infant mortality rate was so high they didn't even name their children until I think they were at least age 8 or 7 or something. Until then, they were just referred to as kid, or, like Steve's son or John's son or daughter. They didn't get an official name until they were older, and this is why people in that time frame had a lot of kids, because the infant mortality rate was so high, and the rate of deaths for mothers giving birth was much higher back then too. Oh, I just rewigged this and put some new. Oh my god, it's fresh and it's so tasty. And maybe as another form of population control, we should engage in hedonism and legalize drugs. Yeah, some people will overdose and die. Is that not their choice to make? It's not like they're committing suicide, it's just a dumb decision of, I'm going to take more this time of something really potent. Oops, dead. It's sad. I'll give you that. It's sad. It's tragic. And we should be given time to mourn over that tragedy. But you can't sit there and blame the drug that has no sense of consciousness at all. An opium poppy didn't crawl off the plant, run across the globe, and climb into somebody's vein. Somebody made a conscious decision to do it. And making it illegal hasn't seemed to stop that conscious decision. So why are we making a debate about it? Honestly, I think there'd probably be less overdoses and deaths from drugs if we legalized it and we regulated it the same way we do with other drugs like alcohol. It's another really deadly one is acetaminophen. It's regulated to a point. Not the same way opiates are. Ooh. That's hilarious. You can laugh at that. But I agree. This is a conversation we should be having in the Discord. In the public array. Overpopulation and capitalism. What are we going to do in the future? What's the answer? Right now, capitalism works. Thank goodness. But it may not one day. What do? We can't sit around praying for someone to save us. We have to save ourselves. And population, another issue. It's becoming more and more apparent and more evident. This is an issue. When I see someone like C.R. Williams saying, look, man, population is 7 billion fucking people. Maybe we don't need to be reproducing as much. If he can see that, I think most people can. But I hold him in high regards. I think of him as an intelligent, articulate individual. Not everyone is. So I agree. We do need to have these conversations. And we need to stop thinking of ourselves as these magic celestial angel babies that are free from any kind of harm or causality. Like, our presence has a causality to the world around us. Like, I'm made out of matter. So when I hit the table, there is a reaction. I exist. I mean, we all flush our shit down the toilet. That's a lot of fucking shit. 7 billion fucking people pooping across the fucking globe. Think about what an enormous pollutant that is. Don't know what else to say. Like, share, subscribe, comment, hit the bell button on any channel you're subscribed to. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And with that, I'm out.